A pack of ravenous, six-legged Xenarian bloodwolves tore into the flesh of the human corpse, sprawled before the wreckage of the escape pod. Hector stared at the holofeed in horrified fascination, his breath catching in his throat. The pod's distress beacon still pulsed, the flickering light reflecting off the bloodwolves' matted fur and gore-streaked muzzles as they fed. Only an hour earlier, Hector had been cataloging the hunting patterns of the apex predators from the safety of the orbiting xenobiology station. The sudden appearance of the human vessel and subsequent crash landing on Xanar 7's deadly surface had hurled the Binar scientists into an impromptu first-contact scenario. His team gathered around the holo display, murmuring in disbelief and concern. Hector switched camera feeds, the magnified view revealing a gaping hole torn in the pod's hull, as if by tremendous force. Impossibly, infrared scans detected human life signs clustered in a cave system 2 kilometers from the crash site. His heart raced at the implications. If the humans had salvaged supplies and weaponry, traversed the treacherous terrain, and located defensible shelter, it spoke to a degree of capability and boldness unheard of in Xanar 7's recorded history. Activating a stealth reconnaissance drone, Hector focused the optics on the cave entrance. 5 armored figures emerged, moving with purpose and discipline, the glint of unfamiliar weapons visible. The lead human, likely their commander, directed them into a defensive perimeter. Hector and the other Binars watched in rapt attention as the humans began a coordinated scouting pattern, advanced firearms at the ready. No intelligent species had ever survived on Xanar 7 for more than a few cycles unaided, the planet's lethally hostile ecosystem presenting an insurmountable barrier. Yet these humans acted with shocking efficiency, seamlessly working together in the face of staggering odds. Even so, Hector knew that time and Xenarian ferocity would inevitably wear them down. He glanced at his colleagues' expectant faces, the weight of his decision pressing upon him. As lead researcher, only he had the authority to initiate contact with the stranded humans. But such an act carried immense risks and unknowable repercussions. The fate of the humans, and potentially the future of Binar-human relations, now rested in Hector's hands as he watched the precarious situation unfold on the deadly world below. Hector watched the holo display in a mix of awe and trepidation as the human survivors continued to defy the odds. Captain Edward Baker led his crew with a strategic brilliance that both impressed and unnerved the Binar researchers. The humans' ability to capture and study Xanar 7's fearsome predators spoke to a resourcefulness and adaptability far beyond what Hector had anticipated. When Dr. Sarah Thompson successfully hacked the juvenile Ravager's brain, Hector felt a chill race down his spine. The sight of the human riding the beast like a loyal steed during perimeter patrols left him both exhilarated and deeply troubled. Such a feat should have been impossible. Yet here were these audacious newcomers, bending Xanar 7's primal forces to their will. As the debate among the Binar scientists grew more heated, Hector found himself torn between 2 opposing viewpoints. Dr. Vaya's enthusiasm for engaging with the humans was infectious, the prospect of an alliance tantalizing. Yet Dr. Zolak's warnings about the unpredictable nature of these strangers held an undeniable weight. The Binar's long-standing non-interference policies existed for good reason, to protect both themselves and the unsuspecting civilizations they studied. Hector leaned forward, his eyes locked on the holodisplay, as disturbing new data streamed in from the surveillance drones. The readings showed a virulent pathogen spreading like wildfire through Xanar 7's predator population, the infected creatures exhibiting erratic, hyper-aggressive behavior before succumbing to a gruesome death. Thermal scans of the human base camp revealed a grim truth. Several of the crew members had fallen ill, their vital signs deteriorating rapidly. The implications crashed over Hector like a tidal wave. If the humans had contracted the virus during their studies of the captured Ravager, it meant the pathogen could jump between species with terrifying ease. Left unchecked, it could potentially wipe out every living thing on Xanar 7, and, if it found a way off-world, wreak unimaginable havoc across the galaxy. Hector's mind raced as he weighed the enormity of the crisis against the Binar's sacred principles of non-interference. To reveal themselves to the humans now, to offer aid and work together to stop the pandemic, would mean abandoning centuries of tradition and risking exposure to the wider universe. Yet to stand by and do nothing while a world burned and a sentient species perished seemed an even greater crime. He turned to his colleagues, the weight of the moment etched in the lines of his face. "We have a choice to make," Hector said, his voice steady despite the thundering of his hearts. "We can cling to our old ways, our safe isolation, and watch as this world and these brave explorers are consumed by forces beyond their control. Or we can reach out, forge an alliance, and face this threat together, in the hope that our combined knowledge and skills may be enough to save us all." Hector saw the conflict play out on the faces of his fellow scientists, the same war that raged within his own soul. In the end, there was only one clear path, one choice that honored the Binar's commitment to preserving life in all its forms. With a deep breath, Hector made his decision. The holo display flickered as Hector opened a channel to the human base camp. For better or worse, the fate of two civilizations would now be irrevocably entwined. As the comm link crackled to life, Hector wondered if this moment would be remembered as the beginning of a historic partnership or the catalyst for a cataclysm that would shake the stars themselves. The comm link crackled to life, and Captain Edward Baker's weathered face materialized on the holo display. His eyes widened at the sight of Hector and the other Binar researchers. "This is unexpected," Edward said, his voice a mix of surprise and wariness. Hector leaned forward, his heart's racing. "Captain Baker, I am Hector, lead researcher of the Binar Xenobiology Station. We've been monitoring your situation, and I believe we have much to discuss." Edward's expression hardened. "You've been watching us this whole time?" "Yes, and now we must act together. A deadly pathogen is spreading through Xanar 7's ecosystem. Your crew is at risk." The captain's face paled. "We've noticed increased aggression in the local fauna, and some of my people aren't feeling well." "We need to meet in person," Hector said. "Time is of the essence." Hours later, Hector stood on Xanar 7's surface for the first time, the planet's acrid air filling his lungs. Dr. Vaya and Commander Talos flanked him as they approached the human encampment. The tamed Ravager loomed nearby, its massive form a testament to human ingenuity. Captain Baker emerged from the makeshift command center, flanked by a tall, broad-shouldered man and a woman with sharp, intelligent eyes. "Welcome to our little slice of hell," Edward said, extending a hand. "This is Commander Hawkins and Dr. Thompson." Hector grasped Edward's hand, marveling at the alien gesture. "Thank you, Captain. We have much to discuss." Inside the command center, holographic displays flickered with data on the spreading virus. Dr. Thompson's fingers flew over a console as she pulled up her latest findings. "The pathogen is mutating rapidly," Sarah explained, her voice tight with concern. "It's affecting multiple species, including humans." Dr. Vallea stepped forward, her eyes gleaming with scientific curiosity. "May I?" she asked, gesturing to the console. Sarah nodded, and soon the two xenobiologists were engrossed in discussion, trading theories and analysis at a dizzying pace. Meanwhile, Hector and Edward pored over a 3D map of the surrounding terrain. "The infected predators are becoming more aggressive," Edward said, pointing to several red zones. "We've lost 3 people on scouting missions in the past week alone." Hector's heart sank. "I'm sorry for your losses, Captain. We've brought advanced medical technology that may help protect your remaining crew." A distant roar interrupted their conversation. Through the command center's reinforced windows, they watched as the tamed Ravager thrashed its head, nearly throwing its rider. Edward's face darkened. "Even our big friend is getting harder to control. If we lose him..." The implications hung heavy in the air. Without the Ravager, the humans' ability to defend themselves and gather resources would be severely compromised. Days passed in a blur of feverish research and tense strategy sessions. The Binar and human teams worked in tandem, pushing themselves to the brink of exhaustion. Then disaster struck. Commander Talos led a small team to collect samples from recently deceased predators. They were ambushed by a pack of Ravagers, their minds twisted by the virus into unthinking killing machines. Hector watched in horror as the holofeed showed Talos fall, his body torn apart by razor-sharp claws and fangs. The security team barely escaped with their lives, carrying their commander's mangled remains. The mood in the camp plummeted. Humans and Binars alike moved with fierce dedication, the weight of their losses driving them to work even harder. In the makeshift lab, Sarah and Vaya hunched over a complex array of equipment, their eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep. "I think we've got something," Sarah said, her voice hoarse but excited. "The juvenile Ravager's immune system. It's producing antibodies that neutralize the virus." Vaya nodded, her fingers dancing across a hollow keyboard. "If we can synthesize these antibodies in large quantities, we might have a vaccine." Their excitement was short-lived as the implications set in. Sarah's face fell as she turned to Edward and Hector. "We'd need significant amounts of the Ravager's blood and tissue," she said softly. "More than we can safely take without killing it." Edward's face hardened as he looked out at the massive creature that had become a symbol of their survival on this deadly world. Hector felt the weight of the decision pressing down on them both. The fate of two species hung in the balance, with a terrible price to be paid either way. Hector met Edward's gaze, a silent understanding passing between them. The captain's mind focused as he turned to face the hulking form of their tamed Ravager. "We have no choice," Edward said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's one life to save countless others." Dr. Thompson's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she prepared the sedative. "I'm sorry, big guy," she murmured, approaching the creature with steady hands. The Ravager seemed to sense something was amiss, its massive head swiveling towards Sarah. For a moment, Hector feared it might lash out, but instead it lowered its snout and allowed her to administer the injection. As the beast's eyes slowly closed, Hector felt a pang of sorrow. This magnificent creature had defied all expectations, forming an unlikely bond with the humans. Now, its final act would be to save them all. The next hours passed in a blur of frantic activity. Sarah and Vaya worked tirelessly, their hands flying over equipment as they extracted vital samples from the Ravager's body. The air in the makeshift lab crackled with tension and the hum of machinery. "It's working," Vaya announced, her eyes wide as she studied a holographic readout. "The antibodies are neutralizing the virus in our test samples." A collective sigh of relief swept through the room, but it was short-lived. Edward's voice cut through the momentary celebration. "How long until we have enough for everyone?" Sarah's face fell. "At our current capacity, days, maybe weeks." Hector's mind raced. "My team on the station," he said. "They have access to advanced biotech facilities. If we can get them the formula—" Edward nodded sharply. "Do it. We'll hold down the fort here and start producing what we can." As Hector transmitted the data to his orbiting colleagues, the sounds of combat erupted outside. Through the lab's reinforced windows, he saw Edward and his soldiers engage a pack of infected predators. The creatures moved with unnatural speed and ferocity, their eyes glowing with viral madness. Days blurred together as they raced against time. Hector coordinated with his team in orbit, while Sarah and Vaya pushed their field lab to its limits. Outside, the attacks grew more frequent and intense. A bone-chilling screech pierced the air as a massive Ravager smashed through their perimeter defenses. Hector watched in horror as it tore through a group of human and Binar defenders before Edward and his elite squad could bring it down. "We can't hold out much longer," Edward panted, dragging a wounded colleague to safety. "How close are we?" Before Hector could respond, a Binar shuttlecraft streaked across the sky, touching down amid the chaos. Its cargo hold opened to reveal rack upon rack of vaccine vials. "Start with the critical cases," Hector ordered as they rushed to distribute the precious cargo. "We need to get everyone inoculated before—" His words were cut short by another wave of infected creatures pouring over the barricades. Edward grabbed a rifle, his face set in iron will. "You handle the vaccine. We'll buy you time." As gunfire and bestial roars filled the air, Hector and his team worked feverishly to administer the life-saving doses. Each moment felt like an eternity, the tide of battle ebbing and flowing around them. Finally, the last vial was emptied. Hector allowed himself a moment of hope before reality crashed back in. The vaccine would take time to reach full effectiveness. Until then, "We need to disperse it," he said, turning to Sarah. "Can we modify your atmospheric probes?" Her eyes lit up with understanding. "Yes, but we'll need to get them airborne, fast." Edward appeared, his armor scored and smoking. "Whatever you're planning, do it now. We're about to be overrun." As the humans and Binars scrambled to prepare the probes, Hector caught glimpses of the battle raging around them. Brave souls on both sides fell to the relentless onslaught of infected creatures. With a series of thunderous launches, the modified probes soared into Xanar 7's turbulent skies. Hector held his breath, watching the holographic displays as they tracked the vaccine's dispersal. Minutes stretched into hours. The attacks continued unabated, and Hector felt his hope begin to waver. Had they been too late? Then, almost imperceptibly at first, the tide began to turn. Infected predators faltered in their assaults, their movements growing sluggish. Scans confirmed rising antibody levels across the ecosystem. As the realization of their success sank in, Hector surveyed the battered remains of their compound. The cost had been staggering, but they had done it. They had saved Xanar 7. Edward approached, his face etched with exhaustion and grief for those lost. Yet there was something else in his eyes as he extended his hand to Hector, a glimmer of hope for the future their peoples might forge together. The days following the vaccine's dispersal brought a tentative peace to Xanar 7. As the infected creatures regained their senses, the constant attacks ceased, allowing both humans and Binars to breathe a collective sigh of relief. However, the calm that settled over the battered compound was fragile, underlaid with currents of tension and unease. Hector observed the somber faces of the human survivors as they gathered to honor their fallen comrades. Captain Edward's voice, normally strong and commanding, wavered slightly as he read out the names of those lost in the struggle against the virus. The Binars stood apart, their own grief for Commander Talos and others palpable in the air. As the memorial concluded, Hector approached Edward. "Captain, we've received word from our rescue fleet. They'll arrive within the week to evacuate your people." Edward's heart made. "Thank you, Hector. We appreciate the assistance, but we need to talk about what happens next." Before Hector could respond, a familiar voice cut through the air. "There is nothing to discuss, Captain Baker." Director Zolak strode towards them, his face a mask of cold efficiency. "Once your people are evacuated, we will sterilize the planet's surface to eliminate any residual viral threats." Edward's eyes flashed with anger. "Sterilize? This planet is teeming with life. Life we've fought and died to protect. Life that nearly wiped out both our species," Zolak countered. "We cannot risk further outbreaks." As the argument escalated, Hector found himself torn. He understood Zolak's caution, but the time spent with the humans had opened his eyes to their unique perspective and resilience. Over the next few days, the rift between the two factions deepened. Edward and his team began fortifying their base, their actions a clear statement of intent to remain on Xanar 7. Hector watched with growing concern as Zolak's patience wore thin. In the quiet of the makeshift lab, Hector found Dr. Vaya hunched over a console. "We can't let them destroy everything we've learned here," she said without looking up. Hector nodded, his decision crystallizing. "Then we won't." Under cover of darkness, Hector and Vaya slipped away from the Binar camp, making their way to the human compound. Edward met them at the gate, his expression a mix of surprise and guarded hope. "We're here to help," Hector said simply. With the aid of Binar technology and knowledge, the human outpost transformed. Advanced defense systems sprang to life, and the compound's infrastructure was bolstered against potential attacks. The confrontation came swiftly. Zolak's shuttle descended from the orbiting station, flanked by security forces. As they approached the fortified human base, tensions reached a breaking point. "This is your final warning," Zolak's voice boomed through external speakers. "Vacate the premises immediately." Edward's response was to activate the compound's shields, a clear act of defiance. The air crackled with energy as stun weapons were fired. In the chaos that followed, one of the Binar shuttles spiraled out of control, flames erupting from its engines. Hector watched in horror as it plummeted towards the human compound. The impact shook the ground, and alarms blared as the wreckage ruptured storage tanks containing viral samples. A sickly mist billowed into the air, enveloping both humans and Binars alike. Panic set in as the first symptoms appeared. The virus, now more virulent than ever, overwhelmed their previous immunities with frightening speed. In the midst of the growing chaos, Hector's gaze fell upon the juvenile ravager they had tamed. The creature paced restlessly, seemingly unaffected by the viral cloud. A spark of hope ignited in Hector's mind. He turned to Edward, who was already showing signs of infection. "The ravager," Hector said urgently, "its unique physiology. It might be the key to a new cure." Edward nodded, understanding immediately. With what strength remained, he rallied his team for one final mission. They moved with unyielding commitment, corralling the massive beast into a makeshift containment area. As Dr. Thompson began her analysis of the ravager's blood and tissue samples, Hector felt a glimmer of hope. But time was running out. The virus progressed rapidly, and one by one the humans succumbed to violent coughing fits. Hector watched helplessly as Dr. Thompson's hands began to shake, her face pale and drawn. I think I'm close," she gasped between coughs. "But I don't know if I can—" The weight of responsibility settled heavily on Hector's shoulders. He looked around at the failing humans, at Vaya's weakening form, and made his decision. Moving swiftly, Hector gathered Dr. Thompson's research and the precious Ravager samples. He initiated the launch sequence on an emergency transport, his heart heavy with the knowledge of what he was about to do. As the craft's engines roared to life, Hector's gaze met Edward's. No words were needed. Understanding passed between them in that final moment. The transport rose into the turbulent skies of Xanar 7, carrying Hector, Vaya, and the last hope for a cure. As they broke through the atmosphere, Hector allowed himself one last look at the planet's surface. The vast wilderness stretched out below, beautiful and deadly. Somewhere down there, Edward and the other humans fought their final battle. Hector silently vowed that their sacrifice would not be in vain. As the stars beckoned, Hector turned his focus to the task ahead. The Ravager's low growl resonated through the craft, a reminder of the untamed spirit of Xanar 7 and the indomitable human will that had changed him forever.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.